this is Dan Watanabe for our new series, The Wabbo File. The Wabbo File will go over all sorts of different things that are happening in the world of entertainment, whether they be articles in Variety, whether they be new movies that have come out, whether it be older movies, whether it be any kind of gossip from the past. We'll also be buttressing this up with Backward Engineering Your Script, which was another series that we were doing, but I feel that it's important to tie it in with anything that we're talking about, because everything, after all, does indeed start with the script. You might ask where I come from. Well, for 16 years, I was development exec at an entertainment company now known as Fremantle Media. I made it through 4 name changes before they succeeded in finally pulling me out. But during that time, one of the shows I worked on for a very long period was Baywatch. And that brings me to having an understanding of how the business side of the entertainment industry works. For as much as Baywatch could look like a joke at times, it was also very important in creating an entire business model for how one-hour dramas were sold in the European market. Prior to Baywatch, there weren't many that did succeed. Baywatch and Star Trek were pretty much pioneers in that. There had been others that had been successful, but those were the 2 big ones. So worked on a number of game shows and reality shows, worked on low-budget features. So as you see, I can talk about all sorts of different areas of the industry. Today I'm going to talk about Valerian. And the reason Valerian is important is because it had the potential to start an entire new style of independent filmmaking on the higher end. And unfortunately, it has fallen apart. And so for at least the time being, the chance of opening up the big world to, the independent world to big budget pictures is probably not going to happen. It will happen again in the future, but for right now, it's going to be a challenge. Now, I'm not going to talk about the content of Valerian because that's an entirely different subject of where things could have gone wrong and where the producers might have known better, because there was really no one involved in the business side of Valerian who has an excuse to say they didn't understand what some of the challenges of this world were, because they were all in the business, especially Luc Besson, when the previous run of independent and international co-productions held sway. And that was in the early days of home video from the mid-'80s through the mid-'90s. And its crash out was partially related to why Hollywood is experiencing a lot of trouble today. So let's talk about some of the challenges Valerian had. First of all, you have a movie that cost almost $200 million. That is a phenomenal budget. I know in the realm of Hollywood pictures that seems like it's an average budget right now, but that's more of a fault of Hollywood than it is fiscal responsibility. A $200 million movie literally has to make $500 million before it can even hope to claim to have broken even. Now, in this era of diminished returns coming in from physical media, which had for many years supported larger budget films, this is especially challenging because the streaming revenues are still in the process of settling down. I know it sounds like Netflix is the big go-to or some of these other sites, but there's still a challenge in being able to return the kind of revenues that at their peak DVDs and other physical media were able to return. So we have a problem with the initial budget because it literally has to be one of the top box office grossers of all time before it can be considered to be truly profitable. The second issue is the way it was distributed. The production company that's doing the distribution is STX, and there has been a lot of controversy over how much STX is really on the hook for Valerian. And this is unfortunate because how can we learn for the future if the present is confused? And here's the challenge. The amount of money that STX is exposed for doing the distribution in the United States ranges from $2.5 million to $60 million. That's a pretty big range. And then if you go into a little bit more of the details, which are covered in a Deadline article, which you will see linked below, you'll see that there is an explanation for how that came about and why there's such a confusion on the numbers. The number one reason there's a confusion on the numbers is that STX did get money from EuropaCorp, which made Valerian, to do the prints and advertising, but it fronted the money. So therefore, yes, it actually did spend that $60 million, even if it has a guarantee to get that money back. And you might say, well, isn't EuropaCorp going to give the money back? I'm sure they will if they can. But given the amount of financial disaster that Valerian represents, there's a possibility that EuropaCorp might not be around or might be in a severely diminished capacity. That's not a good thing. We don't want to see them left on the hook with a bad debt. Now, that debt was financed by JP Morgan. And okay, so it'll be a bank that has another loss on its hands if STX in turn goes down in a shower of feathers because EuropaCorp goes down in a shower of feathers. Can we talk about that for independent filmmakers, it's very important to have more traditional ways of getting funding for a film. And taking a $60 million hit is not one of those ways to convince traditional lenders to give the money. And we don't want to be stuck in the land of just venture capitalist cash, because that always comes with other strings. According to, again, that report, the other thing that Valerian did was it sold off anywhere from 60 to 90% of the rights to the foreign territories in order to get the film financed in the first place. If that is indeed the case, again, EuropaCorp might be able to survive this financial disaster. But now we're dealing with the sub-distributors in all of the other territories. They are now stuck with a film that will underperform. Now, some of them might be able to lay the film off on other buyers, such as TV or satellite, or their local home video physical media distributors. But if the film underperforms, they're all going to take a hit. And every time they take a hit, it means that they are less likely to invest in a film in the future. This is especially true when you get into a market such as France, where you've had very severe financial disasters happening in the world of film. Going into the whole distribution thing, there's another story that has hit the surface, and that is that there was actually a bidding war for Valerian in the early days of its production. And they decided to go with STX because of a relationship that one of the executives at EuropaCorp had with that particular executive from STX. Now, I would love to say that Hollywood is all about making deals with people that you're friends with and have relationships with. And in fact, that is the way it operates on a highest and best level, which is why it's often difficult for people from the outside to come in. But it's very important that if you are going to bring someone in from the outside, that they be at least in the realm of the 2 or 3 best people possible to distribute this. If you have a studio which has deeper pockets, which has a much greater sense of being able to force a film through, has the research to tell you what week would be the best week to put it out in, and has the legacy to which they can get it into the good theaters, you go with that. Allegedly, they also had Lionsgate, which is handling, I believe, the physical media side of it in the US and the UK, and theatrical in the UK. Now, Lionsgate is one of the largest of the independents, so they too have an infrastructure that, okay, it's getting old now, but they still have Hunger Games that they can go back on as to where their competencies lay. So why wouldn't you go with a Lionsgate? when your company has so much on the line to the point where it's a survival issue, you should not be playing let's just hire our best friends. Another challenge that is being presented by this is how much money China has invested. Now, during the past year, China has been very involved in the entertainment industry in terms of things that have been released. I'm most familiar with two of them. One of them is Valerian, and the other is Baywatch. Of course, I worked on the TV show Baywatch, so that had a particular import to me. And the fact that Baywatch went down in a shower of feathers is not good news, because that was a title that had all sorts of legacy meaning, and because the original show didn't have quite the iconographic edge that a lot of other series that have tried to turn into movies that failed did not. It could have relaunched. It could have been like a Brady Bunch, but obviously it wasn't that, which is again sad. For Valerian, China was on the hook for not only $65 million that they invested in Europa Corp, but an additional $50 million into Valerian specifically. We're now talking about a $110 million investment in a company that is now unstable. While me as an Asian have always been very suspicious whenever you hear of trying to get venture capital out of the Far East, because I know how that works. And I know how the Asian system of saying yes until you realize they're saying no. But the fact that they put money out to this degree on this film means they're probably not going to be ready to invest as much in the future. And as we all know, Hollywood was very reliant on China remaining a big cash cow for them to continue their move forward. Now, why is it that I take Valerian very seriously? It's because I started in the world of the American film market. I started in the world working with a Japanese company that was buying projects out of the US. So I had a little bit of insider knowledge on that. And one of the great things that happened because of the American film market was an ability to understand the finances of how the industry works. How is it that you invest money here, there, and everywhere with the right budget number to where you can keep making films that are successful? And during that time, there were a lot of movies that were made that didn't look like box office, but were able to bring in a good return. Movies such as Kiss of the Spider Woman. I mean, can we talk about a 1985 movie that seems less commercial? Or how about A Trip to Bountiful? Or how about Pope of Greenwich Village? Or Runaway Train? These are all movies that were ultimately very profitable because they kept the budgets correct. What happened with the film market at that time, and the reason it went away, was that a bunch of money came in from Credit Lyonnais Bank, which was a European investor that backstopped a lot of the independent production companies to the tune of many hundreds of millions of dollars more than it should have. This resulted in Orion having its credit line increased to almost $1 billion. That money helped Orion go out of business despite the fact it had Dances with Wolves and Silence of the Lambs winning back-to-back Academy Awards for Best Picture, just because they were spending so much on infrastructure that even a big hit couldn't save them. Vestron went down, even though they had Platoon and Dirty Dancing. These are very serious. My boss was on the board of Carolco, and so I got to witness in not even slow motion what happened with that company as it went from Terminator 2 and Basic Instinct to Cutthroat Island. And the problem with Valerian is it jumped directly to Cutthroat Island and not to something that could have been more fiscally responsible. Whether or not Valerian deserved to be this kind of a failure is actually secondary to the fact that it now represents a lost opportunity for a lot of filmmakers who are entering the business today. I'm going to hope that that is ultimately not the case, but unfortunately, I do think that because of the failure of Valerian, you're not going to see anything above the very, very low end of independent filmmaking being given a shot for the near future. Thank you very much. Please like and subscribe, and I look forward to speaking with you again.